Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Business of Business podcast, Two Daughters and Their Dad. I'm your host, Staci J. Dempsey. And like always, thankfully, I have with me one of the other daughters and the one and only dad. So good morning and good afternoon to the both of you.
Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning and good afternoon to all of our viewers and our listeners. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Today, we have a super fun podcast planned where we have a little bit of a difference of opinion. So, number one, are we going to duke it out and ride off into the dawn, or how are we going to end this? It's gonna be a dual battle. So, everybody, buckle up. Here we go. So, the topic for today is we've been in our business, we've been working in our business, we want to scale our business. What are the best ways to go about it? And I know that before we hit record, we were kind of talking through some things, and Dad and Jennifer were kind of going over some difference of opinions and different thought processes. And we thought, you know what, let's hurry up and hit record because this is just too good. This is just too good. So, Jennifer, let's start out with you. You've been, obviously, you both have been in this same situation where you're scaling your business, you're working in your business. You know you need to scale your business. That might require some funding, that might require bringing in some new talent. What's the best way to go about it to really make that growth, maximize that growth? And so, Jen, let's start out with you on kind of your thought process on the best way to do that.
Well, listen, we can duke it out, but at the end of the day, I'm always going to do what dad tells me to do. So let's just keep that in mind. My opinions have,
Let's just make it for this.
yeah,
Let's just set the record straight.
if-
We might argue, but I'll still just do what my dad tells
yeah,
me to do. Please, Dad, tell me what to do. So good. I'm glad you made that disclaimer.
my opinion has only become my opinion because of what I've learned from him. So
There you go.
it's all relative. But, any entrepreneur that's listening to this podcast, maybe you can relate when you first started your business or you are thinking about starting a business and we are talking about funding. And in my experience, guys, I could not even get a bank account with my business name without a cosigner. I couldn't do anything without dad signing for me. So that means the lease, a bank account, a credit card, everything that I tried to do, I could not do by myself. And that had nothing to do with, I had great credit. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with this was a brand new business and nobody knew. I had no backing. And so I needed dad's support to get these things started because he did have the backing. And so that was the only way I was able to do it. I don't know if I could have done it a different way. So very thankful for that. But, the bank didn't even want to see me without dad being with me. So wild. I had no idea before I started a business that it would be that way. Now, thankfully, 9 years later, I've shared with you guys before, every lease I sign, dad does not need to sign it anymore. The bank is begging me to take out a loan, so thankfully, 9 years, my business has been able to show up for itself and I don't need that backing anymore. So just be aware of that because that can be very challenging to start. But once you kind of build a reputation, some cash flow, obviously your business is profitable, then banks, credit cards, leasing, they're all going to beg to work with you. So there is hope for all of that. But when it comes to scaling your business, yeah, I think, you know, what's important for all entrepreneurs to think about is when you are looking to make a change inside of your business, you're trying to add talent into your business, you're trying to scale in that way, is ask yourself, by me doing this, by me adding this or hiring this person, is this going to give me something to my bottom line or is it taking away? So I'm all in for making sure that it is going to add some kind of profit center to your bottom line. So, when it comes to all of the things that it takes to run a business, meaning marketing, payroll, social media, promotions, incentives, all of the things that kind of that business side of running a business, I think as the owner, you should have some experience in. And you should take that on in the beginning because the only way you learn is by doing, to be honest. Now, That's not to say that you're going to turn around one day and say, hey, I'm not good at payroll. I don't like doing payroll. This makes sense for me to bring somebody on that can take care of this for me. But if you don't have the money to do it, then you should be doing it yourself. I think focusing when scaling, you should focus on who, what is going to bring profit into my business. I'm all about investing in your business as long as we're getting a return on our investment. So if you don't think, or you're unsure about the investment, then maybe we should rethink that. Hiring an admin or hiring someone to do your payroll or a marketing manager, that's available to us, right? But the hardest part about running your business, in my opinion, is talent. I was just talking to a plumber over the weekend and he decided to not have any more employees anymore. And I don't blame him. Employees having talent is very difficult. It's very challenging. And every business I talk to shares that same headache from time to time. But, if you want to grow your business, then we need. So my advice to anyone that's starting a business is first and foremost, let's focus on how do you add more talent to your business? Talent equals profit, hopefully. If it's not, then let's let them go. Because when I first started opening my business, I was the talent and I was running the business. And I remember calling dad being super burnout because I'm working 40 hours behind the chair, but I'm also I worked 7 days a week. For the first year I owned my business, I didn't take a paycheck, $0. How many people do you know that would work for a whole year and make $0? A crazy entrepreneur with a dream, right? So, but I think that that's how you have to do it. That's how you kind of get started. You build that bank account a little bit. So you have to take the sacrifice, bring on talent that's going to bring you more profit. So eventually, you can get to a place where you don't necessarily have to work 40 hours a week and then doing all the admin stuff on top of that. So I would rather invest in talent that's going to give me a return on my investment than necessarily jumping into somebody on the business side that is not benefiting the bottom line, would be my suggestion.
Well, and I certainly, you know, can't argue with that. I mean, and disagree. It's just maybe not. I guess what I would say is, that, I mean, that approach is the proper approach, in many situations, but maybe not every situation. So as an example, you have someone who is, the owner of the business, the main talent of the business, and driving revenue. But because of all the other aspects of business, it doesn't allow them to fully maximize their time in what they do best. And that is, hair, or that is whatever the output of your business is. Because, those other things, and yes, sometimes, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to work 7 days a week. I'm going to do both, and that is the sacrifice of entrepreneurship, is, you have to do it all initially in many cases to get your business off the ground, like you did and like I did. I mean, back early on, you went out, you knocked on doors, you made sales presentations, you closed the sale, and then in many cases serviced the business after that. You're the one that had to, make the auto changes when they changed an auto, or, there was just things, you were taking those calls. And so, you were quickly getting to the point where you were selling yourself out of selling, because, the business was growing. So, so I think that in some cases, if it's a situation where, okay, I mean, I'm just getting inundated with the other aspects of business, as much as I'm trying to manage that and still drive revenue, I just can't do it. So now revenue's starting to flatten out or even drop a little bit because of that. And so I think in those situations, finding people who are talented, whether it's outsourcing or you hire an employee, an admin person to handle those things so that you can now do what you do best. So I think there's situations where that does make sense, but I also agree, that, you need to figure out how to duplicate yourself in terms of that talent pool. You know, bring on more stylists into your business. They're the ones that's going to drive revenue. Bring on, again, just in my case, other people that can go out there and be networking, meeting with prospects, doing those presentations, maybe bringing me in to some extent. I would much rather have more people doing that and me getting some type of revenue stream off of their efforts into the business, rather than all of it falling on me to do. So I think that not every situation does that make sense, but nor does every situation that I'm describing would be the best approach. It's just really based on your individual business. And again, the whole genesis of this podcast is the business of business. And so honestly, a lot of people like, wow, I really love what I do. I'd like to open my own business doing it, only to find themselves just not happy doing the business of the business. It's not a matter of, yes, I'm learning it, but boy, I am just, I'm not enjoying this. I'm not enjoying that part of it. I would rather hire that away,
Yeah.
And do my sweet spot. And that is what I do, what I'm educated for, what I visioned my career to be. So, I think that's another big part of it, is making that determination. But now the bigger question comes, either way, where does the money come from? Because that's what we're talking about, right? Is okay, we've got our business up and running, you know, I'm the owner, the founder, and I'm working crazy, to keep it all going, admin, marketing, doing, the work itself, but how do I, how do I go, where do I go from here? How do I grow? And how do I fund that? Because that's the other piece of it. If I'm going to, depending on what your business is, yeah, I want to bring in another person that does what I do. But if that's a highly trained, skilled role, well, then you're going to have to come up with some money to fund that person to bring them in to your business. So again, it's a more expensive way to generate revenue. More upfront expenses. So figure out where does that come from? Where does this money coming from? So as Jen, you said, starting out, you needed backing, right? And most business owners are going to need some backing, getting their business off the ground, financial backing, whether it's just even putting their name on a lease or putting their name, with the bank or whatever the case may be. But as your business grows and you build more credibility, then all of a sudden is, all right, now how do I do this? What's my next step? Do I go to the, Small Business Administration? Do I go to the bank, and try and get some funding? You, I need to borrow money in order to grow, in order to bring that talent in the door. I can't cash flow it, right out of the gate, with the idea that hopefully when they come in, you'll, the business revenue will help you, start to cash flow, what you borrowed, and then obviously, cash flow, that additional talent. But that's where it gets hard, because where does that, do you go to the bank? Where do you try and get an investor? Do you get someone, again, to back you through a loan, private loan, family loans? And those are all things that, are difficult to navigate, because it's, usually it's not just, I need $5,000 or $10,000. With that being said, like in your case, Jen, you know, if you're running your business with that in mind, hopefully you're putting money away, you're making some profits and positioning yourself better for that next move. So to be able to hire and fund, those type of things. But you gotta be disciplined to do that,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and as you were talking, Dad, it's funny, this quote keeps coming up in my mind that for entrepreneurs, you have to, it starts with your why. Like, why did you get into business? And I think what we have in common, Dad, is that we love doing the craft of the business. Like, I know you love working with your clients. You have long-term relationships with clients. Like, you really enjoy, helping people, and being out in the field. I don't know if you would be 100% happy just running the business. And same with me. I love being behind the chair. I say this all the time. I feel like I'm in my prime. I'm doing the best art that I've done, to date. And so I don't want to let that part go. And so to our business owners, you have to ask yourself, why did you open a business? Did you open a business to give yourself a job? Or did you open a business to scale? And again, it doesn't have to be right away, but eventually. And so there's not a wrong answer, right? There's not necessarily a wrong answer, but most people, most entrepreneurs get into business to eventually be able to scale in some way, to be able to pull back in one way or the other. We've talked about it before. It's not, for me, the why is not like, hey, I want to be a millionaire. That would be nice. Still want that. But hey, I would love to pick my kids up at 3 o'clock, right? So what is the why? So let's start there. But ultimately, if you open a business to give yourself a job, well, go work your 9 to 5, right? Go do that. But most people want to scale. And that's what this podcast is about. So how do we do that? Now, I think I'm surprised because, like you said, Dad, I don't know if we're necessarily taking a loan out for $5,000, but um, what Dad has kind of instilled in me and taught me in building a business is that, we need to keep lifestyle low. Um, the profit of your business as you're building, as you're growing, shouldn't be going in your back pocket. It shouldn't be going to lifestyle. It shouldn't be going to bigger houses, fancier cars. Every time I buy a new car, Dad looks at me a little crazy face. You know how he is about cars.
That's why I don't buy new cars. I don't want to be looked at
Let's
crazy.
not start about what Stacy's car looks like, okay? You need a new car, you know, but to my point, Dad has kind of instilled that in us, right? Is about lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
we're making a little bit of money, we shouldn't be spending it on lifestyle. And so, for example, thankfully, when we came up to COVID, for example, we saw a lot of businesses close because they were not disciplined enough to obviously take profit and put it in a savings account and have money in the bank, right? So my business paid 3 months of bills with no income. Thankfully, we were able to do that. So I think I would always suggest that we kind of build cash is king. When you have some money in the bank, you have more freedom. When we have to go and ask to borrow money, that kind of can put handcuffs to us in a way. I always love it when Dad is like tells the story that he goes to get a new car and he's like, "Nah, I'll pay for this car cash," right? And everybody's a little bit nicer to him.
Mhm.
So I would that's just kind of how I've always done it. Thankfully, I've never been in debt within my business before. And so early on, when I opened the salon, I kind of always talk to Dad about like, I would love to open a second salon. And so I think the conversation turned to, all right, well, we know now how much money we needed up front to open my business, right? So if that's the goal, then let's make sure that we're putting money aside. So when that time comes, when you feel like you're ready for that, when the opportunity presents itself, you're ready financially. So I think, my advice would be if scaling is what we want to do, which most people do, let's make sure that we're prepared for when the opportunity comes for you to scale, for that talent to be added to your business, for that change, for that next move, for that bigger space, or to hire a support team to take on the business part, you're ready financially. And so, how do we do that? You keep your lifestyle as tight as you can. You keep putting your money in into the bank and you keep looking for the opportunity. And when it comes, you'll know and you'll be ready for it instead of necessarily having to go taking credit cards and loans and all of that, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just how I would approach scaling and kind of what I've learned and what dad has taught me over the years. Because the opportunity will show itself, right? And so the worst part is a missed opportunity. So hey, I didn't have the money for this to hire this talent, so I dropped the ball in that way. So just make sure that you're ready for when the opportunity hits.
Well, I've said this on the podcast before. It's been a while back, but you need to live at the end of the toothpaste tube. Meaning, when you get down to the end of the toothpaste tube where you're rolling it up, you're squeezing, okay, I don't need quite as much toothpaste this time because you're trying to get every little, so all of a sudden, but when you got that brand new tube, you're like squeezing it out, it's going up and down your arm, you're like, you know, you're just lathering up that brush, So,
Yeah.
but keeping that mindset of listen, yes, keep it, there's a big picture here. And that's why if you're coming into that entrepreneurial space, hopefully you're coming in already lean and mean when it comes to lifestyle. Because that's where I see a lot of people struggle as they come in and, they've already kind of went down the big mortgage and couple car payments and, on and on. And now, there just isn't, they have to cash flow their business in a way that keeps that lifestyle going because nobody wants to go backwards, right? So, but if you're in that situation, then you still need to sit down with, you know, all the players in your family, if that's a spouse and children, and say, listen, we're embarking on this business. And so we're gonna be cutting lean and mean within, where we can, and so really, that might mean, you're not going to eat out 2 or 3 times a week or, you just got to find that. But that is so critical so that you can put money away, and have that showing in your business, whether that you're going out to maybe secure financing or even private funding. People want to see a healthy balance sheet, in your business to invest in your business, no matter who it is. Lifestyle is a big one. And then conversely, if you, like you said, Jen, if you're lean, now all of a sudden your business is starting to cash flow pretty good, you know, the tendency is, oh, I've been living lean for a long time. I think I'd like to do some things here. And next thing you know, you get on that treadmill of lifestyle, and then the opportunity comes along. And I love how you said that. You know, the worst thing about an opportunity is when you miss it, because you're not prepared for it. So, so making sure you understand that, your business is still not where it needs to be from, really cash flowing a nice lifestyle. You have to keep it growing, to the point where, you can start doing more on that end. You'll get there. Too many people jump there quickly. We've seen it. We've seen businesses go out of business because they start them, do well. Next thing you know, they go from a Ford to a Mercedes, and everything's just went up a lot of notches on their lifestyle, and then it's not sustainable. So, so that's a big one. Then the other one too is networking, making sure that you're networking with your financial people, whether again, it's your CPA, where you're banking at, networking with others that might be potential investors so that you can be in a position to look for sources of money when you start to see that opportunity arise. So already kind of have some of those things already working on your side before that happens so that kind of where you stand if it's something that you can approach. But to grow, you need, as we've said, the great, the hardest thing about business is to grow, you need people. And the hardest thing about business is people. and managing people and finding the right talent, so that's what makes entrepreneurship, challenging. But technology's changing some of that too. I mean, we're seeing where businesses can, do more now with less people. Hopefully that's going to be okay for society, but we can do more with less. I mean, I've pictured, like in your business, Jen, each of your stylists having their own iPad so that they can just right then and there while the person's in the chair, you can check them out right there on their iPad, schedule their appointment, so that you don't even need that whole area, you know,
Right.
book appointments, it can all be done. I mean, we're seeing it in restaurants.
Yeah.
I mean, now, instead of taking your card and walking off and being gone for 5 minutes while they just bring the stuff out, do your card right there at the table, you sign it, tip it, and you're done. You're out of there. So, we're just seeing more and more of that kind of technology that's, makes things more efficient. So, all kinds of opportunities with technology coming.
Stuff. So much good information today. And so who won the Duke out? I think it's a tie,
I think it's
right?
a tie.
No,
Maybe
we're supposed to say
Jen.
dad still
Well,
wins.
I'll admit, I kind of, I was really buying into Jen's after I heard it for the third time. I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? She's probably right. She's probably right.
Oh,
So, but, and she probably is in the majority cases, just not every case, I think. So,
We go.
yeah.
There we go. We're
So,
learning something, Jen. So,
right.
well, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in with us. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this episode. And we will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.